All right, everyone. A very good evening to you all, and a very happy pre-Holi and Holi tomorrow. So, thank you everyone for taking out the time, and thank you Tushar for taking out the time and joining us. So, this is one of our in conversation with sessions, right? So, these sessions are meant to be extremely interactive, right? So, generally, I hold such sessions with our top scorers, people who have scored the 90th percentile, 94th percentile. In the case of Tushar, the 98th percentile, for instance, and then gotten on to their dream colleges as well, right? So the idea behind these sessions is for you to have as much of an interactive two-way discussion as possible, right? Learn from Tushar's journey, the things that he did, the processes he followed, right? Including the amount of time devoted to assignments, to pre-class work, the amount of time that he spent writing the mocks, analyzing the mocks, how he leveraged our different processes like 24/7 doubt solving, unlimited validity, etc., etc. And basically, what his overall journey looked like, right? Kyunki a lot of you are currently at different stages of your preparation, right? So some of you are currently completing the classes, some of you have already completed the classes and are in the question practice solving stage or are writing mocks, right? And we would all like to understand from a 98th percentile scorer, what is it that he did differently, or what is it that worked for him? Because a 90th percentile is a pretty unique score, right? Only 2% of the test takers ever manage that sort of score, right? And of course, we will talk a little bit about the ISB admission process as well. So a lot of you over here do have the ISB as one of our target schools, right? And Tushar has managed to get through and will start his course in a couple of weeks' time. So we will have a little bit of discussion with Tushar on what the entire admission process looks like. Of course, we probably won't discuss any actual questions since, that goes against the ethics of what we are trying to do. But we will have a look at what the overarching foundational framework sort of looks like, right? So over to you, Tushar. So if you could just start off very quickly with a little bit of introduction about yourself, your overall GMAT process looked like.
Sure, sir. First of all, thank you very much for hosting me, sir. It's a privilege for me more than, as you said, I mean, I'm more than glad to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, so talking about my journey a little bit, I am an engineer by education. I completed my engineering in 2021 from Manipal Institute of Technology, Manipal. I'm a mechanical engineer who sort of transitioned in the fourth year during placements to a role in the data science, data analytics domain. I got placed at the math company, which is currently sort of branded as Mathco. It is a Bangalore and US based data analytics consulting firm. I got placed there, upskilled myself in the data science, data engineering domain altogether, and worked as a data engineer for 2 years, and then in the founder's office for a little more than half a year in the same company. After which I've sort of left the company now to join ISB. My as far as my master's, pursuits go, I was always inclined towards an MBA. However, I was not never keen on attempting the CAT. The reason for that is that, of course,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to give as much time and focus towards my work experience, the job that I was doing, and I knew that the preparing for the CAT required a lot of opportunity cost for me. And I mean, of course, the opportunity cost is very high because it involves at least a 9 to 10 month preparation phase, and
Mm-hmm.
even after that, there is there is a very tiny chance of me getting selected because of the gem profile, as you know, right? I'm a general engineer male, and that reduces everything by a lot. So that is one thing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
However, of course, time was passing, and I was, spoke to my parents also, and then they were like, when do you really plan to pursue your masters? Because you're already very late when it comes to MBA, of course, in
Mm-hmm.
India at least. So the decision of joining like a coaching for GMAT was a very abrupt one, which I took in the starting of 2023, end of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Across GMAT 30, didn't give too much effort. I did get access to a couple of the recorded lectures just for a trial purpose, and I found it to be good. I found the batch size to be good. So live classes is something that I was really looking for, and GMAT 30 gave me that. So at that time, I really did not give too much thought into this about
Mm-hmm.
whether to which course to join and all that. It was a very abrupt decision, but in hindsight, it is one of the best ones I took. So started preparing for GMAT in January of 2023. Mid of January is when our course started, the
Mhm.
immersive batch of GMAT 30. Went on for about 3 months, after which I was in touch with you again for the next 2 months for the mock preparation and the analysis of those mocks, of course. Attended my GMAT in June, mid of June, got a
Mhm.
good score in my first attempt, which I'm really glad about. Of course, applied in the first round of ISB and a couple of other business schools also. Was fortunate to
Mhm.
get in, and today I'm here. That's
In
about it.
holiday mode, the shirt does you justice for that as well. It's a pretty cool shirt. And yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Ki we often try to pay a lot of attention when it comes to, starting, right? Ki should we start now? Should we delay the decision? And at some point in time, you do have to take the plunge into at least getting started with the process, right? And then later on down the line, you can always improvise, learn new things as part of the journey, right? And it's absolutely a legit process to follow that you should watch the demos at least or attend a live session before deciding whether a course is right for you. But once you have done so, then it's important to start at some point in time and then build onto the process, right? So then, as we already know, as Tushar mentioned, that he's an engineer, which is what a lot of our audience primarily comes from, the engineering background, right? So Tushar attempted the classical GMAT, but then the score that he got, especially with regard to the score breakdown, he had a Q50, V41, and an integrated reasoning score of 8. So now we don't have integrated reasoning, but in place of that, you have got data insights, as you know, in the GMAT Focus Edition. But then data insights is nothing but IR plus DS questions from Quant, right? So that's probably where we will start off with regard to analyzing Tushar's journey. Ki, as an engineer, did you feel that being an engineer and your training as an engineer, did it give you an inherent advantage in quant as compared to verbal? And what would, in your opinion, the best estimate of the proportion of time that you put between quant and verbal when preparing for the GMAT? Just a rough estimate so that, it follows as a guide or as a benchmark for our current students as well.
Got it, sir. Um, I
Mhm.
think the answer to the first part of your question is certainly a yes.
Mhm.
Being from an engineering background, it did give me an edge because, the aptitude part of it, the quant aptitude part of it, I was decently good at it. However,
Mhm.
there are a few topics and a few topics like, for example, like inequalities for that matter, or maybe
Mhm.
the interest calculations, compound interest, simple interest, all of those is something
Mhm.
that, you really need to upskill from practically from scratch. So
Mhm.
certainly it did give me an edge. So maybe if of course, a majority of the people who are applying for such colleges or attempting the GMAT might be from an engineering background just because of us being from India. However,
Mhm.
however, the other kind of people who do not come from like a quant background, they might need to give a significant effort. However, I will come to the second part of your question. It depends, sir. I think
Mhm.
it depends the proportion of time that you should give to verbal versus quant as a 100%, percent proportion of 100%
Mhm. Mhm.
will depend. However, as I've seen from candidates from India, our English is perhaps, I mean, I don't know how better to word it. I might be wording it wrongly, but our English is not maybe at that level where it requires it to be. Even
Mhm.
abroad for that matter, sir, I think it
Mhm.
requires people to have like an edge in English because people in even in our day-to-day language, we really don't speak the exactly grammatically correct kind of English. So answer to
Mhm.
your question, in the majority of the cases, when it comes to people attending the GMAT, is that a majority of the time has to go to verbal preparation for GMAT. And if I had to give a proportion in terms of my preparation, I mean, the time that I gave, I
Mhm.
think it would be somewhere around the 65, 35, 65% of the time I
Mhm.
did have to give to verbal, and only
Mhm.
35% was quant. However, quant was verbal was something that I had to be more regular in. I've often told my fellows who can't reach me for such for tips on preparation. I often tell them that quant at times there comes a moment when maybe if you are not able to study because of course people have jobs and all that, if you're not able to study for maybe 3 4 5 days for some work, there's a hectic time going on at work, you
Mhm.
can still sit for maybe a 4 hour 5 hour period and cover up one topic from end to end and get done with it and maybe practice a few questions in the way. However, for a majority of the topics or kind of questions that come in verbal, I'm particularly talking about RC for that matter. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that is a muscle that can be built with a longer stretch of sitting, in one sitting as such. You really
Mm-hmm.
need to be very consistent with it. And we can deep dive into this concept later, but I think that is where I think consistency in verbal preparation becomes more important.
Exactly. And as a lot of you would have also noticed that if you start solving verbal after, let's say, taking a break of 5 to 6 days, the initial few questions, more of them are likely to be incorrect as compared to quant, for instance, right? Because quant is something that we have been solving for at least 12 years. And if you're an engineer, then 15 to 16 years. So it's almost like, muscle memory, right? It's almost second nature to us. But something which is not that second nature to us, because even when we did study English till class 12, it was mainly more rote memorization rather than really understanding what's going on with a sentence, paragraph, question, etc. And of course, in college, there is no formal, English that we have to necessarily learn. It's more the technical aspects of a given course, which is more quant, science driven, that sort of thing, right? So then regularity becomes the key. And as we have also discussed during RC sessions, we always recommend solving maybe 4 passages at one go or in one sitting, right? And ensuring that we practice at least 1 to 2 such sittings per day, right? Key, instead of doing 20 passages in one day, in which the accuracy is much more likely to go down and therefore be demotivating to the overall confidence, it's much better to sort of space that out each day, each week, each month, so on and so forth. So that is a very important concept in verbal especially. And I would argue to a certain extent in data insights as well, because again, data insights question types are pretty unique to the GMAT, right? Data sufficiency is not something that comes up every day or in other exams, for instance. And the same goes for question types such as multi-source reasoning, two-part analysis, graphs and tables, so on and so forth, right? But again, they are still more quant-oriented than verbal, at least certain aspects of DI. Of course, multi-source reasoning, two-part analysis is much more verbal-oriented. But effectively, the point is keep verbal unless we are more consistent with it on a day-to-day basis, almost on a class-by-class basis, right? It's very difficult to catch up after the classes, okay, classes may, I won't complete the homework. And then after the classes, between then and when I have to write the exam, then I'll solve all the homework sets in one go, right? So that sort of strategy very rarely works, which is why doubt solving becomes really important, right? So Tushar, maybe if you could talk a little bit to the doubt solving processes and how you leverage the doubt solving processes to sort of get the best out of the course and out of the GMAT as a whole.
Got it, sir. So I think doubt solving offered by GMAT 30 was one of the key things that sort of was really crucial in my preparation. I think
Mm-hmm.
so there are two parts to it. Number one is the kind of doubts. For the first part of this is that whenever I used to post my doubts, they were answered very quickly and obviously very, in a very
Mm-hmm.
comprehensive manner. I've also mentioned in the testimonial that I sent you
True,
that
true.
the one small question that I used to send used to be answered by maybe two scrolls of WhatsApp. So that used to be
Mm-hmm.
a task in itself that, hey, let me sit for 5 minutes just to understand this one question, the
Mm-hmm.
answer to this one question that has been asked. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that the interesting part in verbal, it is very important to also look at the other four examples and the other four
Correct.
options, and not just the option that is correct. Why is it correct? You also
Mm-hmm.
really need to pay attention to why the other options are not correct, because that is going to be your way of actually coming to the fifth option, which is the correct one. So
Mm-hmm.
so this is one part of it. The other part of it, sir, is the fact that uh, whenever you're studying, you're not studying in maybe like you're not studying alone. Of course, some people might be taking that one-on-one mentoring with you, but I was a part of a batch with maybe 10, 12, 14 people, if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
wrong. And
Correct.
people used to keep asking questions. So I think that solves things in two forms. One is that you get that peer group, you understand that okay, even this person is maybe struggling with the same thing. And the other part is that even if I am not studying, I am seeing that maybe after a whole day of not studying, I am looking at maybe 10 questions that have been answered, 10 doubts that have been put up by other friends of mine. and
Mhm.
answered by you in the same comprehensive format. And number one, that gives me a little FOMO that, hey, let me just get back to studying.
Sure.
Number two, I have already a bunch of questions that I can look at, refer to, um, and maybe these are the doubts that I would be having if I were to attempt those questions. But because
Mhm.
I'm not, they are attempting those questions. I have like a question bank and a doubt solving bank, if I were to call it. So
Very good.
really solves, and I think that is where GMAT 30 is really really good.
Mhm.
I've recommended GMAT 30 is this particular feature, if I may, to multiple
Mhm.
people, and I think that's a key highlight of the services that you offer.
Right. So I think that is really important. Instead of just using the groups to sort of post your own doubts and get responses to questions, it's also important to sort of at least read through what other people have also posted, right? So that you can be part of that more comprehensive discussion, right? क्योंकि sometimes जब आप खुद question answer करते हो or when you are explaining the question, then your thought processes become much more enhanced as well, right? When you have to explain why this option is incorrect, this option is incorrect, especially in verbal where it's not so much the case as in quant where you're solving the equation and then selecting the option. Instead, verbal it's always the best of the five, right? Whether it be CR, RC, and at Tushar's time SC as well. But again, elimination has to be a critical part of the process, right? And more so now in the GMAT focus edition when it's only critical reasoning and reading comprehension, right? Now, segueing into a slightly different aspect, Tushar. So you worked full time with Mathco, right? At the founder's office when you were preparing for the GMAT, right? So a lot of our students are also full-time working professionals, right? Some of them have pretty hectic job schedules. Some work at McKinsey, others spend 2 to 3 hours commuting to and fro from their workplaces, right? So for example, I'm in constant touch with a lot of students who say that it's difficult to sort of get the time and or the energy to sort of sit for 1 to 2 hours at a stretch in order to put to studies, or in order to study a topic in detail and then solve the assignment sets, question sets, and so on and so forth, right? So if you could maybe talk a little bit to that effect, because that is often a crucial problem, right? How do you manage both a full-time job as well as retaining the motivation to sort of, sit down after the classes or at least ensure that you have completed a certain number of questions, gotten those doubts resolved prior to the next class? And what advice would you give to students, let's say, who say, well, for example, during a weekday, I just don't have time to devote to studies and I'll put in 6 hours over the weekend, right? Maybe even 6 hours per day on Saturday and Sunday. But weekday में मेरे पास एकदम ही time नहीं है. मतलब I have to get up at 7 o'clock, be at the office by 9 o'clock. By the time I come back, it's 9 o'clock at night, and then I just don't have enough motivation to attend, questions after lectures. Maybe I can attend a lecture because that does not require too much of my brain, too much of my bandwidth, or too much of my mental faculties, because it's more listening to the like listening to the topics or listening to the faculty and then being part of the process. But when I have to sit down on my own to study or solve the assignment sets, I just don't have the enthusiasm and or the motivation for that. So in your opinion, do you recommend that it would be a good strategy to, let's say, कि अगर दिन में 2 घंटे spend करने हैं, I'm going to spend it, let's say, 7 hours on a Saturday and 7 hours on a Sunday and make up the 2 hours that way? Or should we try to be a bit more equitable with regard to how we are proportioning our time throughout the week?
Good, sir. So I think let me start with the last part of your question. And
Mm-hmm.
the best way to do it, the better way to do is definitely the latter, which is that
Mm-hmm.
you should sort of spread it out. However, I understand that people are working. I was also working at that time, and I think you just need to do it, sir. I think the small answer to that is that the situation might be very specific to different people. Maybe in today's
Mm-hmm.
time, half of the people out there are maybe not even having to go to the office, or maybe slightly less than half are not even having to go to the office. People are working from home and all that, and that solves problems a lot. I think. To answer this question, let me sort of break my whole preparation journey of 5 odd months
Mm-hmm.
into two parts. First is the 3 odd months of attending the classes with you, and
Mm-hmm.
The second part is the last 2 months where I was focused on practice and as well as giving the mocks. I think when it comes to the first part, at least in the initial phases of those 2 to 3 months, when you're just looking at concepts one by one, you really don't maybe need to look at solving questions, too many questions, of course. So uh, okay, let me rephrase it by saying that the question solving, the practice intensive part is the second part, it's the latter part of your preparation. Initial part of your preparation is where you're only grasping the concepts very, very well. And of course, doing some augmented problems along with that, just so that you understand how to apply those concepts very well. Now, the answer to that is that, of course, in my case, it was GMAT 30. I had number one chosen a kind of a class structure where I was sitting for maybe twice in the weekdays and once in the over the weekend. So that solved the problem only by a lot to me. 5 days of work, out of those only 2 days I have classes, that too in the night. And I used to structure my work to sort of solve for the issue that I might be able to I might have to miss a class. I just did not have to because I was structuring my day that way. And of course, the weekend it was free to attend the third class, so that was not a problem ever.
Correct.
Coming to the second part of it, uh, I used to also keep in mind that in case there are some client calls, because of course in the services setup that I was in, there were client calls that used to happen. At that time, I was still working with clients and not in an internal role. Client calls often used to happen over, at night also, because clients are often sitting in the US, in the Europe. So what I used to do in those rare cases, of course, is that I used to refer recordings very diligently. As soon as the recording used to be available, I used to sit for that maybe over the weekend, or preferably as soon as possible after the class is held, so that I don't miss out on a lot of things, right? Uh, the second part of it is, of course, I'm still talking about the first part of the preparation during the classes. You would also want to start preparing, start practicing the questions from the official guide during this time. Mock test is something that will come later after you're done with the problems. But official guide, you do have questions. Of course, the one that I did, it did not have questions separately along with difficulty. But I think a couple of official guides from the latest editions also do have, easy, moderate, difficult separately mentioned. So you start with it that way. So maybe if I've had a CR class, I would want to, if not possible over the weekday, which is preferable, I would want to sit over that over the weekend. So maybe if I've had 4 hours of class only about CR logical, fallacy framework that were taught by you, 2 hours in the same week, preferably, to solve questions of those question type from the official guide. So that kept me up to date. So of course, dedication is required for that, no doubt, and problems will be there. But I think I was able to solve it well in the sense that out of the 100% of classes that were held by taken by you, I was only I at the end of it, I only missed about 20% of them. For those classes, I made sure that I refer to the recordings as soon as possible. Now, let
Got
me
it.
come to the second part of the preparation journey, which is the part where it is more of self-study. Nobody is there to maybe directly guide you. Of course, rarely you would want to connect with your faculty. In my case, I wanted to connect with you. So in that part of your journey, I think the flexibility is much more, because you are not constrained by anybody else's availability to teach you. It is you yourself. And in that time, I think what becomes most important is for you to understand how your schedule or how your efficiency works. Um, I am not an early riser, by personality. So I used to make sure that it is at night when I give most time. And of course, another one thing that I used to do during this time is that, because I had a work from home setup, things weren't very hard and fast about working maybe 9 to 5. I often had to start with some meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning, and some meetings often used to go until maybe 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the evening also. Now, in that time, it is quite rare that a person is working for all of those 12 hours. You definitely, when you do take a break at maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock for lunch, you might want to stretch it by 30 minutes, half an hour, just to sit for some 20 questions or 30 questions within that. So yeah, so that is something that you is very specific to a person. But I think understanding what is it at what time of the day your efficiency towards studying is the most, you find that time and just grab it. And of course, during this time, it is also very important, sir, to give mock tests. And I think mock tests, the I mean, the frequency that I followed for mock tests was approximately once in a week. and that once in a week can easily be over a weekend. So I think the best time for to do that would be that you just keep practicing questions and studying over the weekdays. Give
Mhm.
the mock test on preferably a Saturday, and you spend Sunday only analyzing the mock test and diving deep into not just the questions that you've done wrong, but also the other questions. So, of course, things are very flexible, but this is what
Mhm.
I found to be very, very helpful to me, sir.
Very good. So I think there are two aspects to the preparation. One is, of course, the class plus question solving. And then you have got the mock test writing, analysis, and more question solving without the classes, right? So during the second half of your preparation, of course, you have more flexibility simply because the class schedule sort of goes out the window and it's only self-preparation. So then there are a lot of things which you can do if you plan properly, right? Ki, as Tushar mentioned, ki, if there are certain planning aspects that can be undertaken, then by all means, those are some of the things that we can do. So even if the work hours are pretty gruesome or pretty rigorous, planning, I think, is a crucial part of the process, right? In some cases, talking to your managers can also help without telling that you're preparing for the GMAT, but just, ensuring that you get a bit more time to prepare for the GMAT by saying, ki, okay, can I take this time off, for example? And in a lot of places, certain leaves are definitely granted, especially if you have accumulated your CLs and annual leaves, then maybe a week to 10 days leave will not be too, difficult to obtain. So the bottom line is still it's important to devote at least, I would say, maybe close to an hour every day, right? Even if you can't devote maybe 2 to 3 hours, it's a little bit like exercising almost, right? It's a little bit like going to the gym that you may not feel like going to the gym every single day, right? So on those days when I don't feel like going to the gym, I ensure that I put in at least 45 to 50 minutes, right? Ki I drag myself to the gym. And that is easier said than done. Ki, matlab, if I have to commute for 3 hours, then, it's easier to say ki I'll push myself to go to the gym. But again, if you look at it from the big picture perspective, 45 to 50 minutes is not too much time, right? And you'll find out that once you have devoted that initial 45 to 50 minutes, that will easily extend into 1 hour 20, 1 hour 30 minutes as well, right? And that is just about the right amount of time, especially in the initial stages, right? Because initial stages mein, as Tushar mentioned, we don't have that many questions to focus on, right? The assignment sets are limited to 20, 25 questions per class, right? So the focus is more on reviewing the lectures, reviewing the classes, and then, solving the limited number of questions and then posting those doubts in the groups, right? And probably everyone who is here would know ki or can attest to ki their doubts getting resolved almost pretty much instantaneously from the time when they post it, right? So we are pretty responsive on the groups as well. Me, Gaurav, Amik, everybody is there. And we all try to help you as best as we can, right? But it is important ki that daily 45 to 50 minutes have to be put in from your side, right?
I'll just add something to that. I'm sorry to cut you off there, but
Sure, sure.
on that same chain of thought, I think, as you said, gymming, it is consistency is definitely the
Hmm.
key. However,
Mhm.
the most crucial part comes towards probably the end of your preparation, where you really need to shift the gear to maybe a gear 5 or a gear 6, and you really need to push the button there.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
at that time, of course, you might be probably the most consistent employee and the best performing employee in your company,
Mhm.
at your workplace. You might want to also do justice to that as much as possible. However, definitely, I mean, more to especially towards the end of your preparation, you really need to understand that no hell is going to break loose if you maybe sacrifice maybe 1 week, 2 week, or for that matter even 3 weeks with
Mhm.
maybe a slightly lesser efficiency at work. However,
Mhm.
the GMAT that you give right now is really going to make or break things for you for your entire career. The MBA college that you get into is probably going to put you in like a different league of professionals altogether out there. I think that is something that people really need to realize. I'm mentioning this because I've met a lot of my peers who have been giving
Mhm.
GMAT even probably for a year and a half or 2 years, and
Mhm.
are just not able to make the score that they want to get to.
Mhm.
At that time, I think it is really, of course, these people are probably doing really great work and being appreciated really, really well at work. But to those people, I really tell that, hey, you really need to look at the bigger picture here. What is going to help you at the end? So, of course, I also wanted to do justice to the work, but I'll just illustrate this with a small example, which is that I realized when I had started giving mocks that RC is not, it's something that was fluctuating a lot for me. I wasn't especially bad at it. However, it was fluctuating a lot, that in some cases I used to get maybe two RCs completely wrong, or in some cases maybe two RCs I used to get right out of the three or four that were there. So it used to fluctuate a lot for me. That is where I realized that RC is a core competency that I need to build. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it is not one of those competencies that can be built in just a day. So what I was reminded of when I sort of noticed this is, number one, the thing that you mentioned, that maybe reading Guardian articles regularly is something that can help me. So that is something that I started off with. Of course, at that time, my work was a little more hectic. We had a deliverable coming up at work. So how I sort of turned around, found my way through that also is that, as you mentioned, you really need to find that 1 hour, 1 hour, 30 minutes every day. That sometimes becomes difficult. However, I understood that at the moment, really the need of the hour for me is developing a core competency in RC. And even till the end of the day, I had one promise to myself that I would really attempt 3 to 4 RC passages every day, come what may. The work might be absolutely hectic for me during that day. However, even if it is 12:30 at night that I'm closing off my day at work, I will sit for maybe half an hour more, and that half an hour will get me through maybe 3 passages, or 40 minutes will get me over the 4 passages with good analysis. So that is something that I need to build. So again, this is where customization also becomes important, in the sense that you need to understand that where are you among other people. Some people are really great at solving CR. However, RC is an issue because long passages and whatnot. So that is why you need to understand where you are, and sort of tune your preparation that way so that it fits well within your schedule also. And of course, coupled with the fact that towards the end of the preparation, you really need to maybe, if needed, of course, that's a very controversial thing that I'm saying here, but if needed, bring your efficiency slightly down just to focus the GMAT preparation in a fifth gear.
Absolutely. And that also shows, how much of a mature head Tushar has on his shoulders, right? Because it's really important to understand that even if you're at a very high paying job, right? Let's say you're paid 20 lakhs a year or even 25 lakhs a year, right? The ostensible reason that you're planning or preparing for the MBA is because you're not quite happy with where you are at your job, right? Either you want to progress to a better career, or you want to get promoted to, let's say, a managerial position, right? That is, you're expecting some sort of growth, or you want some kind of growth, and you want that pretty quickly, right? You don't want to wait for 5 to 10 years at the same company to achieve a certain position and a certain paycheck, when an MBA could basically be the shortcut to that journey, right? A 2-year period instead of a 10-year period, maybe, right? And in that context, it is in that context that it's important to realize that, well, the money that you make now is basically the money that a company pays you to sacrifice on your dreams, right? They don't want you to dream too much. So here is a paycheck, and you think about the company and not too much about yourself, right? But again, I mean, an MBA, especially from a top college, is really like a global passport, right? You're not limited to any sector, any domain, right? Because an MBA is so generic. Plus, it opens up opportunities to countries outside of India as well, especially if you're doing an MBA from a top IIM such as IIM ABC or the ISB, for example, or even overseas universities, right? That's really the brand power of an MBA. And that is very difficult to get, even if you're working at, let's say, a farm company or a top 4 consultancy, for instance. That global passport and that domain independence is really hard to secure, right? Just even if you're working at McKinsey India is really different from the McKinsey that they have over in the States, right? But an MBA from ISB is very much at par with, let's say, an MBA from Duke or something along those lines. The rankings are very, very similar, right? So that is really the advantage that you get from an MBA, right? And therefore, it is important, come what may, you do push yourself to devote just that little bit of time. कि काम में थोड़ा सा maybe you operate at 80% efficiency or 70% instead of 120%, right? Similarly, if there are other team members, they can pick up more of the work. And of course, you have to compensate for it in other ways. Ki after you write the GMAT, then you pick up the Slack, or you have had such a track record that does allow you that little bit of flexibility, right? So again, those things are very, very intertwined. But yes, as a general rule, it's very difficult to give 120% at work and then also give 120% to your GMAT preparation. But again, the GMAT preparation is really a short-term burst with tremendous ROI, right? A job is more like a long-term marathon, right? And the ROI is going to be pretty, y equals to X kind of a graph rather than a y equals to e to the power X kind of graph, if that analogy makes sense. Brilliant. And it's really important to realize that, right? Key companies all the time will pull in a lot of tricks with regard to emotional blackmailing. Key, we took care of you when you were nothing, so you should not slack off, etc., etc. At the same time, you have to realize, and now that LinkedIn is there, I hope a lot of you do realize, key, if there is a recession or even if there is a prediction of a recession, companies won't think twice before laying people off, right? I mean, every day you hear stories of Amazon, Google, Facebook, just letting people go for no fault, through no fault of theirs, really. And the reasons given are in line with company policy, company optimization, so on and so forth. So it's important to look at it from that perspective also. At the same time, you have to justify your paycheck. I mean, you can't just go on a leave and, leave the company high and dry and just prepare for the GMAT. So it's all about striking a balance, which is what you'd be doing as a manager as well, when you'd be resolving these sorts of conflicts, crises within teams. So think of it as a preparation towards that end, right? So the next couple of points that I wanted to discuss, Tushar, before opening the stage up to Q&A, mainly around maintaining an error log, right? So a lot of my students often come to me and say, "Ki itna lamba error log maintain karna, is it needed? Can I just not mark the questions I got incorrect and then move on to the next question? Do I necessarily have to document where I went wrong at every particular question and then review the error log periodically? Is that sort of really needed? And if it is needed, then what really are the upsides to sort of maintaining and reviewing a detailed error log, right? That's one. And the second part to that question would be, how important are the official questions in terms of your preparation? So for example, a couple of days ago, I'll explain the context for this question. A couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with my student who mentioned that he had solved 50% of the official guide, and now he just wanted to move on to writing mocks, right? So what is the importance of solving the full official guide, if there is any importance at all? And when should one write the mocks in relation to the official guide coverage?
So I think let me start with the first part of your question, which is the importance of an error block. I think I am a classical example of a person who, classical depiction. Are you there, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think I'm the classical example of a person who initially thought that error log is something which is very tedious to be doing, and I think because of that, I think I should not maintain error logs. However, just go on with solving questions. I'm just remembering, okay, this is just reading, analyzing the questions as such. Uh, I think maybe a month or two into my the preparation. Till then, I was only solving uh, the official guide. I had not come to the part where I was solving the mocks yet, giving the mocks yet. Till then, I was not maintaining an error log. I think the calling of maintaining an error log came from within myself, and I really found myself uh, not being able to recall the reason why I had done this particular question
Mm-hmm.
wrong a month ago. And I had nothing to sort of reach back to, except that I would have to go back to that page in the PDF and refer to that. So that is where
Mm-hmm.
I think I realized the hard way that maintaining an error log is something which is super, super important. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all two purposes. Number one is that it gives you a handy reference guide to visit back to whenever you're revising. I think the
Mm-hmm.
second thing is that just because it is something like notes, right? You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
notes. I remember when I used to study in school, my mother used to tell me that, hey, just you should get in the habit of writing something, because if you write something, some picture of that notebook, that page in the notebook gets stored in your mind. It is very similar to that. Maintaining an Excel sheet with that. Uh, I used to color some particular cells in a particular color and write it in maybe super important dash dash and then the justification. That
Mm-hmm.
image sort of gets stored in your head. So even if you're not referring, going back to it, just because you yourself are framing the explanation to the reason or the reason behind your answering that question wrongly, it gets stored in your mind and has a more um, a more retention, so to say, in your mind. That is how error log is important. I think so. Since I noticed that, I started maintaining an error log, particularly for SC at that matter. I mean, particularly for verbal. With the quant, I wasn't facing this issue. I was able to sort of just look at the concept and go back to questions. So I started maintaining error log for official guide. However, when it came to I was still slightly patchy when it comes to maintaining the error log. During the mock test, I think the error laws become extremely important. I think mock tests are the perfect way to analyze, perfect way to be in that setting of an actual exam and simulate those conditions completely and practice for it, because it is not just one particular topic, it is not just one particular difficulty level. It is a simulation of the whole exam, where you're not just solving verbal, you're doing quant also, DI also along with it. So it is the perfect the perfect simulation. Let me come to the second part of it, which is the solving of official guide. I The answer to your question, which is that whether it is even important to solve the whole official guide before coming to the mocks, I think it is important to solve it, definitely more than half of the official guide. And again, a very controversial statement. Most of the people out there would probably say that you should get done with the official guide completely and then jump to the mocks. However, while doing the official guides, I started noticing somewhere in the middle that I was getting decent enough accuracy in the official. I was, of course, past the halfway mark at that point, and I was also past the point where you were teaching me concepts. So concept clarity was done. That is number one. I had practiced decent number of questions from the official guide from each type of topic and each type of question type. So that is one thing. So that is absolutely important. The prerequisites for getting uh, to the mock test phase is that you should be done with the concepts completely. Every type of concepts, you should have practiced a few problems to understand application of those problems, and should have been done with at least half of the official guide completely, and then jump only to the mock test. That is what I did, sir. I jumped to the official guide when I was sort of a little past the halfway mark when it comes to the number of questions in the official guide. And
Sure.
even after I started the official guide, I think one way in which mock test analysis, sorry, when I stepped to the mock test, the mock test analysis helped me in the fact that if I was noticing myself lacking in maybe CR type of questions, I did have some questions left. Of course, anybody can argue that, I mean, the best way to do it is we go to GMAT Club and there is no dearth of questions out there, for sure. In fact, even I came to you sometime and you sent me like a bunch of 2,000 questions if it was that. And so there isn't a dearth of questions, but I think I had official guide as something that I could come back to. And number one, revisit the error log that I had made for CR. And of course, number two, attempt the questions that were unattempted. And maybe then move on to GMAT Club or whatever.
Good. So I think another advantage also of maintaining an error log, apart from the fact that when you write down something, you automatically retain it a whole lot better, right? Just the act of writing down because you have taken the effort to write it yourself, right? Another advantage, especially during the mock analysis phase, the importance of the error log is it helps you identify patterns, right? Ki verbal mein there are a lot of patterns, right? Jaise CR mein, for example, ki inference question mein generally a weak, diplomatic, middle of the road option should be selected. A strong or an extreme option should be avoided. Similarly, assumption mein how to negate other frameworks like causation, correlation, generalization, specialization, all or profit, revenue, cost, numbers, percentages. So all those different types of patterns, flaws, frameworks. And it really enables you to get a bird's eye view of कि कौन से specific type के questions में ज़्यादा गलतियां हो रही है when you are presented with those questions in a mixed bag sort of setup, right? क्योंकि during the practice stages, you're probably going to pick a question category in and of itself and then solve 20 or 30 questions of that category in isolation. But then what you really want to say is how does your accuracy differ, if at all, when you're solving them in a mixed bag, that is in an RC followed by a specific CR followed by another RC, because then your brain needs to such a sort of switch amongst the different question types for which the conceptual clarity really needs to be right up there in order to be, facilitating that switch. right? So that
Absolutely.
also is, kind of where the error log importance sort of kicks in. Ki now you sort of want to get into the habit of formulating an error log, right? And then when you're analyzing your mocks or writing your mocks, then you can also share that error log with your trainer, right? With me or with Gaurav. And you can get our views on ki yahan pe aur zyada focus chahiye. Yeah, these are the strengths, and we do a sort of a SWOT analysis, right?
Right. Right. I can
Great.
also share my error log if you want, sir. Do you want me to share my
Yeah,
screen?
sure. That would be great, I think. So
Awesome.
I'll make you the host. Yeah, so now you should be able to share.
Got it, sir. So there are two kinds of error logs that I maintain. One is for the particularly for the pattern that you talked about, and other is just
Mm-hmm.
the general error log, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had definitely sent us a link of like a trial error log
Trial
in
error
the
log.
sense
Mm-hmm.
the one that should be maintained. I sort of
Mm-hmm.
tried to replicate that as much as I could in terms of the effort that I was willing to put into this.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share this.
Sure.
This is the one that I maintained for verbal because verbal is the one where I needed an error log altogether. And
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, it you would definitely want to mention the topic, the type, question type from which that is
Mm-hmm.
coming up. Some people would also want to maybe take an extension of this and put the particular type of critical reasoning problem, whether it is an assumption problem, whether it is some other problem. So you would
Mm-hmm.
also might want to put a column for that. And the other thing is that the notes part, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one that you sent me had columns for the reason that I attempted this wrong and maybe the actual one that I was thinking about. I
Mm-hmm.
was, of course, something very specific to me, but I wasn't willing to put in that much effort. I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted one column with just the fact that, what is the one that is to be kept in mind. So
Mm-hmm.
I put some bold faces somewhere, some color scheme somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I myself haven't looked at it for a very long time. I just pulled it up while you were speaking. But this is something that
Mm-hmm.
really helped me. And the most important part of an error log, maintaining an error log, is that a few days before the exam, but definitely in the last 1 week before the exam, I was able to just revisit this. And number one, I could just pick up random questions that I have done wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and go back to these questions, attempt them maybe once again, and see whether I'm getting it right now. To see
Mm-hmm.
whether I've really improved from that 1 2 months ago of performance. Or the other thing is that I can definitely just go through the notes here. If
Mm-hmm.
needed, refer back to those questions, open them from the official guide or the mocks, and and just see, revise the concepts. If I've done one particular thing wrong, why did I do it wrong? Stuff like that. My
Mm-hmm.
SC log was, of course, very, very detailed because SC was, of course, at the time when SC was still there, you would definitely know how what
Absolutely.
like it was probably the most tricky part of
Mm-hmm.
GMAT when it comes to it. Probably also why it was scrapped. I'm not really sure, but it was
Yeah,
definitely
who
the most
knows?
interesting part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think as you can see, I mentioned the word wrong very, very clearly that, hey, I did this wrong, I did this wrong. However, it is also important for people to keep in mind that and this is something which grows, whenever you're attempting official guide or you're doing the mock test actually, just because you're getting an answer right doesn't mean you're really, really the expert at that particular question type.
Mm-hmm.
I've also mentioned, shaded some questions which I probably did not get wrong or stuff like that, but it is still something which I really have to keep in mind. And that is where the same point comes in, that you really need to look at the other four questions also, the other four options
Mm-hmm.
also. You might have eliminated one option because of some other reason, but whether that is the correct reason or not is something that you will only get to know when you deep dive into that problem once again after attempting it correctly or incorrectly. When you do
Mm-hmm.
that, and I definitely recommend people to do that, if not an official guide, definitely in the mock test questions.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing 32 questions within verbal, within the span of 1 hour of actually giving the mock test. You need to give 1.5 hours to that, in which 1 hour should be the mistakes that you did, but the rest remaining half an hour has to be towards the questions that you also got right, but you're still skimming through it just to see that, hey, did I get it right for the right reason, or did I just get it by a stroke of luck?
Mm-hmm. And that is an extremely hard thing to do. I mean, even for me, the questions that I get correct, even if I don't completely understand it, I would still not try to learn too much from it. कि चलो correct तो है ना, ये अपना क्या बोल रहा है कुछ होगा. So that is a really difficult thing to master, really, especially if you're able to. That's an absolutely amazing feat, right? That means you're letting go of all ego, your preconceptions of the question, and then you're just looking at the question objectively, right? Which, of course, would happen in due course, right? Initially, once the ego goes away. But still, it's better to get a question incorrect, because then that pretty much ensures you're forcing yourself to read through the explanation or analyzing the question or posting them on the WhatsApp group, right? As might be the case.
Right, sir. I'll just take maybe 30 seconds to touch upon the other kind of
Yes.
error log that I was maintaining. This isn't an error
Mhm.
log as such, but this is just to analyze the pattern.
Mhm.
If I'm not
Mhm.
wrong, I might be wrong in saying this, but I think the numbers that you can see here are just the mistakes that I've done in each of the questions. So my aim is as such to just minimize the kind of mistakes, or I might be wrong in saying that. I mean, probably might be the number of correct questions. However, this particular, row here would used to give me an illustration of the patterns here. Now, I don't know whether you can notice any patterns or not, but what I was concerned with is the score that I was getting. And I'll not come to that. That is very specific to me. However, maintaining something like that is can probably help you in identifying the patterns in an organic way. Instead of
Mhm.
deep diving into it, that hey, is there a pattern? Just
Sure,
plot it in
sure.
Excel, use the tools out there, minimize your headspace, let that headspace be only to answer the questions.
Exactly. And it also helps you identify कि have you really improved from the last mock that you wrote, right? कि कहाँ पे improvement हुआ है. And you can even break it down by question type, right? जैसे CR में you break it into strengthen, weaken, assumption, boldface, to do an even greater deep dive into the individual question types, right? RC may be either you categorize it as RC or you categorize it into primary purpose, inference, accept, strengthen, weaken, so on and so forth, right? So that way, even if the overall score remains the same, which is a pretty natural thing, कि अगर एक हफ्ते में मान लो आप 2 mock लिख रहे हो, probably in the first 2 to 3 mocks, you're not expecting a significant divergence in the scores, right? But then breaking it down into the different question types gives you, again, that broad level picture of where the improvements are taking place, right? And which areas still need to be worked upon. So that way also that trend or that, bar chart or that pie chart will also help, mainly to do your own SWOT analysis as well, right? Great. So I think those are all of the questions that I had for Tushar, and hope everybody here found those responses pretty insightful. I certainly did, right? So now I'll open the floor up the chat box mainly to questions, right? So you can either just type in your questions or you can also speak via mic, right? So we will respond to those questions. So anybody who wants to have a go at asking Tushar with any aspect of his preparation, any specific question they might have, or even with the ISB process. So I think Tushar and I would be happy to share our insights.
That's it. At
So
what timeline? Yeah.
Mhm. So Aryan had a question. What timeline of the prep should we start doing the official guide?
Got it. Hey, Aryan. So my answer to that is that the first thing that you should really start off with when you're practicing when you've started preparation is that number one, look at the concepts. If you're attending Param sir's classes, the concepts are comprehensively covered in that, along with definitely a few questions along with every question. And I think the best part of Param sir's way of teaching is that he often tries to spend less time on just explaining the concept and more time on explaining the concept through method of deep diving into one particular problem. And that deep
Mhm.
dive can go even as long as 20 minutes, but that is
Mhm.
what helps. Once you get done with that, I think the first thing to look at is the assignments that you're getting from your faculty. So Param sir will be sending you assignments. Look at those assignments, which as Param sir said are only 20, 25 questions at times. And these are the first thing that you should look at. However, to sort of have an edge over the others, once you're done with maybe, I mean, I'm not sure what is the number at the moment, but if there are maybe in total of 5 CR classes which are to be covered, once you get done with those 5 classes, or even for that matter, 4 out of 5 classes, you should now really jump to the official guide and not just rely on the assignments that you're getting. Because if you rely just on the assignments, in the initial part of your preparation, the number of questions that you're practicing are going to be very less by design. You can't rely, you should not rely only on the assignments, and get started with the official guide, do some questions, notice some points there. And I think this is the perfect time for you to really ask your questions to sir and send your doubts to sir, because that is where the question that you will ask, the doubts that you will ask, the explanation to those doubts will also be very critical in forming the base of the topic for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You might not want to, or you might not be able to refer back to the real basics of the topic or the concept once you're at the mock test phase, just because at that time you're not looking at one concept, but you're looking at 10 different concepts in their
Mm-hmm.
entirety, um, in order to get to the score. But at
Mm-hmm.
this time, you can look at CR only as one silo and deep dive into CR, build that competency, maybe 80% of it through the assignments and the classes itself, and the remaining 20-30% of it by just doing the official guide questions. Yeah, so the short answer is classes, assignments. Once you're done with most of the classes of a particular topic, move on to the OG and start doing that.
Very good. Because I think that's an important point. Key at the mock writing phase, it's very difficult to look at a concept from scratch, right? I mean, the best you can do is maybe look at कि अच्छा इस question में भी ऐसे भी एक concept test हो सकता है. That is the sort of insight you want to derive at that point, instead of learning a concept from scratch कि numbers and percentage में what would be the discrepancy, right? क्योंकि as Tushar mentioned, at that time you're looking at 10 different concepts at the same time and keeping track of everything. So you can look at special cases or special applications of a given concept, but not really the concept from scratch. All right, so I think Shashwat had a question. Were you sticking to just official questions in GMAT Club or some other sources such as LSAT/1000 series, etc.?
So the short answer to that question, Shashwat, is that I used to do what Param sir used to tell me. So for this particular thing, the kind of filters to put, even for that matter, the company from which to buy the mock test and attempt the mock test is something that I reached out to Param sir and Gaurav sir. They were my faculty, and I used to rely on their word completely. They often mentioned in the classes itself that, hey, when you're starting to practice GMAT club questions, these are the kind of filters that you should put. So I would let Param sir complete that answer, really.
So yeah, I mean, LSAT/1000 series is something I often recommend, right? Because, 1000 series is just past official questions, branded a little bit differently. And LSAT versus GMAT, CR and RC at least, they've got a lot of overlap, right? And even when there isn't overlap, the LSAT questions, by general consensus, are at a much higher difficulty level than the corresponding GMAT passages, right? So my line of thinking is always कि if you're aiming for a certain score, let's say a 720 to 730, right? मतलब वो तभी आएगा when you're able to do those 750 to 800 level questions correctly, right? And there aren't too many official questions that are of that difficulty that they have released publicly, the GMAC, right? Although it's a billion-dollar company, they still want to closely, hold on to their questions. Though the LSAT questions provide a beautiful alternative for that, right? And again, there used to be quite a bit of intellectual DNA overlap between the GMAT and LSAT till at least the 1990s, when the same parent body would administer both exams, right? So LSAT is a very good source for CR and RC, and even 1000 series. 1000 series, I think some ex-GMSC employee released those questions, and therefore the GMSC got mad and sort of said ki these should not be referred to. But again, it's pretty much common consensus that they are also past official questions. So then both of them are pretty good sources. Cool. Then I think Zaid had a question. So hi Tushar, thank you for a wonderful session. Thank you, Tushar. Yes. How was your application process at the ISB, and did you apply to any other college as well?
Right. Hi, Zaid. Thank you. My application process with the ISB, first of all, let me start off with, if you want to apply for the ISB, that is your initial target that you set for yourself. I think the first thing that you should do for yourself, which is something that I did, is that you start off calculating in the reverse direction, which is that ISB application deadline. I was targeting round one, which I was able to make. September first week is when the deadline tentatively is every year. you want to keep at least a month just to craft your applications and sort out your recommendations. So you go back 1 month, and along with that, you also want to keep as a contingency 1 month just to give another 1 month or 1.5 months just to give another attempt of the GMAT. By that calculation, I came down to mid of June, or worst case end of June, to give my first attempt of the GMAT. So
Hmm.
again, I am going back to the GMAT part of the whole journey, but that is what this webinar is all about. So that is something that you should first of all do. If you want to target a particular, a particular round from a particular business school, then that is the reverse calculation that you should do, which brings you to a tentative timeline already. That is number one. My application process to the GMAT, of course, is the standard one. Once I was done with my GMAT, since my time had been so intensive, I gave some time to myself just to chill. It is only probably in the month of August, where starting of August, where I really started deep diving into the essay questions that were there. Initially, started off with writing a statement of purpose for myself, which was irrespective of what the essay questions were, which helps me analyze, which helps me analyze what has been my journey of life, not just school, not just college, not just my work experience, but of life. What are the incidents that have shaped me altogether? What are my strengths and weaknesses? And of course, where is it that I want to go, by leveraging my competencies, my skills, and of course my passion, and what is it that I really like. Crafted the application and sort of submitted my application as well as the recommendation from my manager in the company in the starting of September. Received an invite received an invite a few weeks later, and gave my interview probably on the 31st of September, 30th of September it was. And yeah, that's about it. I think mid of November is when I received the result. So that was my ISB journey. Yes, I did apply to some other colleges as well, a few of them abroad, but it is ISB that I am going to at the end. However, for all practical purposes, the kind of process remains the same. You need to give the GMAT for ISB as well as the other colleges abroad. You need to craft your essays. The essay topics might be different. The essay questions might be different. However, essays in general are something which are very common for MBA applications, full-time MBA applications, and recommendations also something very very common.
Hmm.
Even in for that matter, things might be different when it comes to different colleges, but I would still like to say 80% of it remains same. So the kind of question that you prepare, why MBA, why this particular college, uh,
Hmm.
deep diving into your resume and the things that you've done, spikes that you have in your career, which is something that is very crucial when it comes to MBA applications. You need to refer to it. It's the same for ISB as well as other.
True. And you also do need some time for applications, right? Because there will be some introspection that will really be involved, right? Ki, what is it that you exactly want to get out of the degree? Why are you pursuing your MBA? Ki, instead of, stock answers such as, ki, we want to see ourselves at an impossible destination or an impossible designation 5 years down the line. You have to be a bit more realistic, focus on what you've done so far, where your passion lies. I think that's a really important thing because ultimately, an MBA degree, although it does give you a global passport, the passion is really important, right? You want a specific designation, just say you want to work in finance, consultancy, marketing, HR. So it's really important to find out what really motivates you. And for that, a certain layer of introspection really helps at the outset, right? Also in your interviews, because the AdCom will definitely touch upon those aspects. Great. So Aditya had a question. Hello, Tushar. How did you create the error log sheet? What should be the important parameters? I think this has already been answered. I'll share an error log sheet with you, Aditya, but broadly speaking, it should be the question, the link to the question, the correct answer, the incorrect answer. And for questions that you get incorrect, you want to analyze what you got incorrect, right? You eliminated A because of this reason, B because of this reason, C because of this reason, and you were confused between, let's say, D and E, right? That is one pattern of error log, which I usually recommend, because then it really gives me an insight into your thought process. The other kind could also be the one showed by Tushar. In the notes section, you basically write the bottom line principal finding from that question, right? कि यहाँ पे this was the thing that I had missed, right? Or here I missed focusing on an extreme word, Or for example, in SC, this is the idiom to focus on. So it's really going to be within the notes column that there might be slight differences, right?
So and I think there are pros and cons in the
Mm-hmm.
two types of ways that you've mentioned. In the first way, it really helps in terms of collaboration. In my situation, I was in a decent place. I mean, of course, I wasn't acing my mocks by any stretch of imagination. However, I was in a decent place, so I did not feel the need to show you my error logs and
Mm-hmm.
then. However, had I shown you my error log, you wouldn't have been able to understand anything. So that is a disadvantage of my error log versus the one that you mentioned. The
Mm-hmm.
one that you mentioned, it gives you a deep dive. It gives an external person that a deep dive into how the candidate is thinking. So that
Mm-hmm.
helps in terms of collaboration. However, my error log, the way I was looking at it is that it is sort of like a bank, a question bank that I want to, like an Excel sheet that I really want to refer to in the last week of my preparation. So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean, as you mentioned, Aditya, what is the important parameter? For me, the only important parameter was that I should be able to look at this one thing and recall whatever is the thing that I want to remember. So one key important parameter is what does Tushar 1 week before the exam want to remember by looking at this error log, and that is what I.
Great, great, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that would be the advantage to, maintaining an error log with bottom line principal findings from that question, right? So it depends on how you want to maintain the error log. For example, if you want to share with me, then of course a more detailed note taking is what I'd expect to see so that I can also understand, okay, this is how you're thinking, and this is where the thought process should change to, right? Okay, we got the final couple of questions. So Abhishek says, hi Tushar, you started writing the mocks from which month before the actual exam? So Tushar's actual exam was mid-June. So when did you start writing the mocks, Tushar?
So my exam was mid-June. I started writing the mocks 2 months before the exam. The course that I had taken with you, it started off in mid-January, went
Mm-hmm.
on till probably the first week of April, if that is, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
remembering correctly. So that is approximately 3 months of the course as well as practicing questions along with the course. I was by the time I got done with the course, I was done with half of the official guide also. That is the importance of doing it along with it. I didn't have to give any extra time just to do the official guide questions separately. So I got started with my mock tests 2 months before my actual exam. And within those 2 months, I was able to do 10 mock tests, give 10 mock tests in total. That averages out to one mock test every week or so. I think a little more than that frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, because we're talking about mock tests, I think I am emphasizing on that fact again, which is that mock test analysis needs to be, you need to spend at least twice the time of the mock test itself. If you're giving the mock test for maybe 2 hours or the 3 hours, whatever it is in the focus edition now, you need to spend more time than that, at least double of that, just to analyze the mock test and make an error log out of it. Now, when I say analysis of the mock test, coming back to the same point, it is not just the questions that you've got wrong, it is also the questions that you've gotten right for probably the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, mention those also in the error log. And of course, if you give it from good resources, of course, a bunch of the resources are out there to give mock tests. MBA.com is one. Expert Global is the one that I refer to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but Expert Global, I think the way Expert Global helped me is that the visualizations that they had prepared by
Mm-hmm.
default after giving a mock test were amazing for me. So how is your topic specific or section specific performance as compared to the previous mock test to this mock test? How many have you gotten right? How many easy questions did you get right versus how many difficult questions did you get wrong? Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that really helps. So all of those. So it is not just the questions that you need to analyze, uh, the resources or the stuff that you need to analyze and refer back to after giving a mock test are multiple. So you need to spare out that time, which is why I was saying that if you're giving a mock test on a Saturday, your Sunday needs to be spent only in analyzing that mock test because it can easily take 4.5 hours for analyzing a mock test from end to end. You can
Mm-hmm.
take and give Saturday just to give the mock test. Maybe look at your score a little bit and be happy or sad about how you're scoring, but give Sunday just to analyze the mock test end.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's really important. The number of mocks also, right? I always believe the number should be somewhere between 8 and 10, especially when you're writing the GMAT for the first time, right? And 2 months is a very good amount of time to devote to mocks, right? So that basically means you're writing just about 1 to 2 mocks every week, right? And you're also getting the chance to analyze those mocks in detail, correct? So Abhishek, the short answer is 2 months before your exam date is when you should look to write at least the first mock, right? And Ulrich had one final question. Hey Tushar, congrats on the score and the ISB Admit. The error log was very insightful. Could you talk about your exam day experience? So before Tushar answers this, one thing which I'd mention is exam day experience should always be in center exams, right? As you know, ISB now no longer accepts the GMAT online, right? Or the GRE online, simply because, it's rife with cheating allegations. Somebody else writes the test, somebody else is the candidate. So to weed out all of those issues, they have pretty much just said we are not going to accept the online GMAT period. So it should always be in center exams, right? And earlier also, when online GMAT exams, people used to get high scores, then their scores would go into admin review, and that would result in extra 2 or 3 months of just waiting. Sometimes the scores would be cancelled. So to take out all of that sort of, bureaucratic nonsense, it's much better to write it in center, irrespective of even if a university accepts the online GMAT, still not risk your mental peace just for the sake of convenience of writing the exam from home, right? Because the way the proctor setup, etc., works, it's not really convenient. It's going to add to a lot of the stress, right? Cool. So I'll let Tushar answer the exam day experience question, including maybe the center at which you wrote the exam, at what time was your exam, when did you arrive for the exam, and maybe the entire process.
Sure, sir. My exam day experience was so I had prepared well for the exam. Also because I had decided that I want to take a leave for almost a week before the exam. So I structured my exam in such a way that my exam was probably on a Monday or Tuesday, and including the weekend, I had taken leaves for 3 4 more weeks before the weekend. So that gave me a good 1 week cushion where my work in the office was completely not on my mind, which is something I really recommend. If it is the last, if it is a GMAT attempt that you're giving, it is a very expensive exam. So let's get that out of the picture. So you really need to, judiciously look at making a productive use of the attempt that you're giving. So give yourself ample time to just focus on the exam and not have any other things from work, roaming around in your mind. That is one. I had spoken to Param sir well before the exam, and he had also recommended to me that I should not be giving mock tests a lot in the end phases. So definitely not in the last 3 to 4 days. My
Mhm.
last mock test that I gave was probably about 6 days before the exam,
Mhm.
and I ended up scoring not a lot in that mock
Mhm.
test. I probably scored way below my target, or even my average score.
Mhm.
So that is why I decided that, hey, let me just be confident. And now that I've already booked the test and I've made my mind to give it on that time, let me just revise my mock test. So apart from practicing questions, one thing which I really referred to was the notes that I had. So my notes were probably my. Yes, sir, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Now you're
Yes, sir.
audible. Sorry, I admitted you
So,
were.
yeah, so you can hear me, right?
Yes, yes, you're audible. Perfect.
So,
Mhm.
so in the last good 1 month or so, my notes were my Bible, apart from the mock test error log itself. So in the last 1 week, that is what I focused on, revising the notes, looking at the error log. And error log is something that I referred to very, very well because, of course, I wasn't practicing too many questions in anyway.
Mhm.
Coming to the actual exam day itself, I had spoken to you and had a good half an hour pep talk in which you told me whether to have coffee on the day, what to carry
Mhm.
with myself, what not. So I really appreciate you're going the extra mile in terms of making sure that the exam day experience is good for me. My
Mhm.
exam was in the morning, I think somewhere around 9:30ish, whatever, 9 o'clock. I'm not sure, but whenever it was 9 o'clock, sorry, it was at 11 o'clock slot. So there is a slot in the morning at 8 or 9 o'clock, and the one at 11 o'clock was my slot. I arrived good 1 hour before the exam, half an hour before the actual reporting time. So,
Mhm.
and it was a center in Gurgaon, I think somewhere on the MG road in Gurgaon.
Okay.
And I reached there half an hour before, and when I went there, I was told that, hey, you just can't enter. So for
Mm-hmm.
half an hour, I just roamed around myself, just kept deep breathing and did not do anything else. I didn't look at my phone, didn't do anything else apart from that. One thing which you had also told me, sir, to do in the starting of the day, on that day, on the exam day, actually, is uh, is to attempt some questions from verbal. So as
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned in the very beginning of this webinar, uh, attempting verbal questions is something that doesn't come to us very intuitively, very naturally. Because we are Indians, it is English is definitely not our mother tongue. From whichever corner of India you come, English is not going to be your mother tongue. So even if quant is something that comes very naturally to you because it is numbers at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
verbal it is not that way. So what I did in the 1 hour journey towards the till the exam center, when I started at maybe 9:30ish in the morning, I just attempted some questions. So I only opened GMAT Club. I had already subscribed to the forum quiz part of it. So I
Mm-hmm.
attempted one RC passage, maybe 3 or 4 CR questions and 3 or 4 SC questions, and that's all that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did not focus on whether I got it right or wrong. When I attempted it, I all that I looked at is, okay, let me just analyze this question. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and this exercise of maybe half an hour or 25 minutes is just to get yourself in the groove
Mm-hmm.
of thinking in English. If I there is no other way to put it, thinking in English, and that is probably also the words that you use when you were telling me
Right.
to do
Right.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Just think in English so that you can sort of get in that groove. And after that, it is only barely an hour before you actually um, get started with the first lick.
Mm-hmm.
My exam experience was pretty smooth. As you know, GMAT test centers are quite professional that way. There's really absolutely pin drop silence within the exam center. It is a very proper stand sort of procedure where you show your passport first, and then you get like a sheet or probably whatever it is. Then they show you to your room. Uh, One issue which sort of bothered me at that time is that there were other people, and some people within that test center, of course they might be at different times, some people
Mm-hmm.
probably started with or maybe were already at that AWA part where you had to type out your answers. Now
Mm-hmm.
the clicks of the button are something that bothered me a lot. So how I used to alleviate that is that, as you know, in these GMAT test centers there is this beautiful amazing headphone,
Mm-hmm.
noise cancelling headphone, which is kept there. I
Mm-hmm.
did not use that throughout the test, but while reading the RC passages where I absolutely required window of silence and focus, I used to put them on. I'd put them on for the first one, and then I just put them on for every RC passage that I got. It helped me immensely. One last part that I would really want to focus on, mention when it comes to the exam day experience is that read about the actual exam procedure very, very well. One thing which
Mm-hmm.
I was not prepared for is that 8 minute break that happens between the verbal and quant
One.
sections. By the way, attended the verbal first, quant second, and then so on and so forth. Between the verbal and quant, number one thing that I really should tell everybody is that however your verbal has gone, don't think about it. You
Mm-hmm.
know that your first section is done and dusted. Whether you've done it right, whether you've done it wrong, you just can't do anything about it. So just get in the groove for the second one. Just deep breathe within those 8 minutes. But the thing that I got wrong is that uh, I did not spot like a clock, a wall clock out there at the right time. I went to the washroom. I started deep breathing. Had half a glass of water, and I thought that I was on time. But when I really got back that, hey, I want to go back inside for my test center, I did not. I was not expecting that they were going to be frisking me again, and that is something that got me off guard. I When I did start with my quant section there, and also by the way, when you go back to your this thing, within those 8 minutes, your your desktop has probably logged off. So the
Mm-hmm.
administrator will have to come in again, type the password, and then you can get started with your test center with your actual test, resume your test. That is something that caught me off guard. Wasn't expecting that, and when it started, the first thing that flashed in front of me was that you are starting this section 29 minutes, 29 seconds late, and these 29 seconds will be cut from the end of your section. So the clock when it started for me was already at 29 seconds, and that really caught me off guard. The first couple of questions, I'm not really sure whether I've got it right or wrong, but I definitely did it in a haste, which is not something that I recommend. So again, a very, very small thing, but a very crucial thing. Please spot a clock in front of you and count those 8 minutes very, very judiciously. Be ready in 5 out of those 8 and not beyond that.
Mm. Absolutely, because you're responsible for keeping track of your time. And now it's 10 minutes instead of 8, and it's only just one 10-minute break. But again, an admin person won't really warn you, ki, hey, you have got 1 minute left until your break, or 2 minutes left till your break, that sort of thing, right? Another important point which Tushar mentioned was it can very well be the case that, let's say, 3 or 4 days prior to your exam or in the week leading up to your exam, your final or your penultimate mock does not quite give you the score that you want, right? Or even your target score, or it might be even lower than the scores in your preceding mocks, right? And that's why it's always important to look at the average rather than that just last mock, that one last mock that you wrote before the exam, because we often have a tendency of conflating the thing which we did last to the thing which is about to come, right? And again, there isn't really a direct correlation between what you did last and what you're going to do 1 week from then, right? Which is why it's always the average scores that you want to look at, right? You want to take the average across your 10 marks, and that ensures you're not putting too much pressure on that last one mark, right? Because sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves mentally that the last mock went bad, that we sort of lose confidence, we start double questioning ourselves, we sort of start revisiting things that we were already clear on, instead of focusing on the actual areas that we need to focus on, right? And that's why it's very important not to write any mock at all, maybe 3 or 4 days before the exam, because that doesn't really serve any purpose. I mean, if you do great, then well, you're just extremely tired. If you have to write another test a couple of days from then on, right? And if you do poorly, then that just sort of, deflates your confidence quite a bit. And then the overall preparation sort of goes for a toss, right? Because as human beings, it's very difficult to sort of look at things from a big picture perspective, right? Okay, this is what my output has been over the past 5 months. And it's very easy to sort of fall into the trap of, okay, this is what my output has been over the past 5 days, and this is probably my actual output, right? And that is definitely not the way to look at things, right? Again, it's consistent practice, it's dedicated practice. It's really that 5 month practice as a whole that you want to focus on instead of the 5 day practice. But again, being able to detach yourself from that score that you got 5 days prior to the exam does require a level of maturity, or maybe a conversation with me or with Gaurav sir, right? Who can just sort of get you thinking in that direction. This is just an anomaly or an aberration to the trend, and it's really the trend as a whole that we want to focus on, right?
I will also add something to that, sir, and it's also a great segue into a closing thought, which
Mm-hmm.
is that it, as you said, it is very important to detach yourself from the last score that you got and not put so much pressure on this last score. I will stretch it further to say, from a very practical scenario, that GMAT by design is an exam that you can give very frequently. There is not
Mm-hmm.
like a cap of once a year as there is in the CAT exam. So it is also important to remind yourself, especially in the last few days when you're probably really fretting that how will my exam go. It is
Mm-hmm.
important to remind yourself that this is not the end of the world. In case, God forbid, the exam does go bad for you, you can probably give it again. Of course, it is an expensive exam. There is a lot at stake. However, it is, I mean, it is not the last chance that you have at a great GMAT score. So that is a thought that helped me a lot in the last couple of days. That hey, okay, what is the worst that could happen? And this is not the end of the world. So let me not fret over it too much. Let me be confident on my preparation. Let me revise what I have, the error log, the notes, and leave the rest up to God.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great closing thought. And irrespective of how much ever you might have to spend on an exam, you of course don't have to spend anything with us because it's unlimited validity. So again, till the time you get the target score, we are by your side as best as we possibly can, right? So that is also something that you can take some homage in, right? Cool. So I think that's where we will end it. So thank you so much, Tushar, for tuning in and giving us 1.5 hours of your time on a Sunday just before the Holi and just before your ISB. So all the best for your journey at ISB. I'm sure you'll do great, and you'll take your career to greater heights, right?
Thank you
So
so
thank
much,
you
sir.
so
I
much.
really thank GMAT 30 and I mean, you, Gaurav, sir, both of you for the great job that you've done and the great role that you've played in my preparation. And Yeah, sir, I think it is a great place for me. It was a one-stop shop. GMAT 30 was a one-stop shop for me, and I think it should be for the other people also. But just remember that you have a number of resources to refer to, live classes,
Mm-hmm.
recordings of those classes, the assignments that you get, the mock test, the error logs, sample error logs that you will send, and all that. And just be consistent, and it can happen. Because I often see people switching from one faculty to the other faculty, and maybe different types of companies. But I think giving it your best with the one stop shop, one faculty that you have, I think it can reap great benefits. And it did for me. So I'm really grateful to you for that, sir.
Great to hear that, Tushar. All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Tushar, again.
Yes,
It
sir.
was a very insightful session, and I'm sure our participants have been greatly helped by your insights. And hopefully our participants can also mirror the scores that you got and achieve the GMAT Focus 685 plus, right?
Absolutely,
So,
sir. I
and
wish them all the very best. And I wish you a very happy holiday, sir. Thank you, sir.
thank you. Thank you. Same to you, Tushar, and all the best with ISB. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.